Well, that is the grave of William Blake. Although we're not exactly sure that's the exact spot, but it lies somewhere, they reckon, within about 50 feet of here. The problem is that this place where I'm at, Bun Hill Fields, just if you give you a quick 360, this is a very famous graveyard here in London, including Blake there. There's several other famous, that's somebody else who's famous, and that one, there's many famous people buried here. William Blake, of course, was nominally a Baptist. He was christened in a Baptist church, but in no way was Blake a Baptist or any kind of Christian in the normal sense. He was a unique man. He had his own very, very unique and pantheistic spirituality. Let's get my notes out in a minute. Yeah, of course, he was someone I think I would have got on with, although he died almost 200 years ago. Like I said, he had this very, very individual and idiosyncratic kind of view on the world. In spiritual terms, he was a great artist, he was a great painter, he was a great poet and writer, and general free spirit, I think. General free spirit. Blake was born in 1857, just a short distance from here in Soho, and he lived most of his life in London, not far from here. He moved to Somerset once and spent some time in a house in Somerset once, but basically he didn't travel very far. Perhaps he realised that, on the scale of his understanding of the universe, the world is a very small place, and whether you travel down the street or to some foreign country, you haven't gone very far. When he was a little boy, when he was about 5 years old, he very famously, he went to his father and he said he'd seen God in a tree. He'd been walking past a tree and he saw God. And his father was very angry and beat him for that, but as fathers did in those days. But he was, I said he had his own unique form of art and literature, and he managed to combine the two. You see, he worked as a printer, and as a printer, one of his jobs was to make engravings on printing plates, copper plates for the books, and he soon incorporated that into his art. He actually made engravings which he used to print, and quite remarkable. When he started writing poetry, he used to combine the two together. I'll just read you one of his most famous poems. This is probably the most famous William Blake poem. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, what the furnace, what thy brain? What the arrival, what dread grasp, dare its deadly terrors clasp? And when the stars throw down their spears, and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Did he who make the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? The thing is, when he wrote this poem, he put it in illuminated text like this, you see. This is actually a Blake original, so this is, I've got the zoom on, have I? No. See, Tiger, tiger, this is the tiger, it's his famous poem, and it's all illuminated. He made these pictures himself, and he combined a poem with his art. He had these unique spiritual ideas, very anti-authoritarian ideas, like he was opposed to slavery, he was opposed to the British Empire, he celebrated when there was the French Revolution, he celebrated when there was the American Revolution. And he inspired lots of other people. For instance, he illustrated John Milton's Paradise Lost and Dante's Divine Comedy. And I'll give you another example of his artwork. This is a painting he did. This is his famous portrait of Isaac Newton. How much you can see that there. That's Newton there. And can you? I think if you think about it, you can see the point he's trying to make here. Isaac Newton, of course, was a famous scientist. And as you can see, what he's doing, I mean, he's naked. Blake drew everyone naked like this. This is this sort of like classical kind of, in a classical kind of style. You can see that Newton is bent over, hunched, focused intently on this calculation he's doing with a compass. Right, and he's got his back turned, and he can't see this beautiful garden behind him with flowers and rose bushes and moss and other things. So the point that Blake is trying to make here, I think, is it's a kind of like a parody, it's a satire of Isaac Newton's science, because I think Blake understood. I mean, it was very different culture in those days to what we have today, but there were people who were ultra materialists. Fewer than there are now, but there were still people who were ultra materialists. And Blake was sort of satirising that attitude. I mean, if he'd lived today, he might well have done a painting like this of Richard Dawkins, or Professor Chris French, or James Randi, or one of these other ultra materialists, but he chose Isaac Newton. Actually, Isaac Newton was a bad choice, and I don't think he's being entirely fair. Look, there's a squirrel. Hello, Mr. Squirrel. These squirrels are amazingly friendly. They're amazingly brave. Look, he's coming right up by me. Hello. I've got nothing for you. Oh, come here. Now, I think Isaac Newton was a bad choice, and he's not being entirely fair to Isaac Newton, because Newton was very much a mystic as well as a scientist. And in those days, you could actually be a mystic and a scientist, and many scientists were. In fact, our modern fad with ultramaterialism is just that. It is a fad. There's nothing fundamental in terms of knowledge or wisdom about it at all. For example, I mean, anyone nowadays who lives in the world today will know very well the difference between astrology and astronomy, won't you? Astronomy is one thing, astrology is something else. They both come from the astra, the word to star in Latin, but they both mean very different things. However, an ancient Egyptian wouldn't understand the difference. Honestly, if you tried to talk to ancient Egyptians had only one word, it meant both. There was no contradiction for them between exact scientific material knowledge and mystical philosophy. Whereas in our world, they're entirely separate. They're regarded almost as opposites. And there are even people who will claim you can be an astronomer or you can be an astrologer, but you can't be both at the same time. So as I said, that's a beautiful picture, though, by Blake. I think he also had insights into sort of like, must have had a lot of spiritual experiences. I mean, there's one painting, there's a whole series of paintings actually he did, featuring a character called Urizen, who is this kind of demonic, bearded, sort of homunculus-like creature that is ripping a hole in space-time. If you Google Urizen, you'll see the various pictures of Urizen. He's almost ripping a hole in space-time, and he's coming through, and he's sticking through a compass not unlike the one that Newton is holding in the portrait, but much bigger. Another very famous picture poem by Blake. And as I said, he's inspired Neil Haigh, who was a great artist of the modern world, someone I know very well, a personal sort of acquaintance of mine, who illustrated a lot of David Icke's books. He's inspired many other artists. He wasn't very well known in his time, and he died in poverty. But you know, nowadays he's very, very famous, and he's buried here in Bun Hill Fields. There's his gravestone. Apparently the organisation called the Friends of William Blake have located the exact spot of the grave. I'll go and have a look for it in a minute. But apparently they want to put a permanent tombstone on the grave. Another of Blake's famous poems, of course, is Jerusalem, which was put to music very famously. Get up a minute. Oh, that's it. Still recording, yeah. See if I can find the exact spot. It's somewhere within 50 feet of here, I know. It's somewhere in this area. Jerusalem, of course, the famous stanza, and did those feet in ancient times walk upon England's mountains green, and was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen, and did the countenance divine stand forth upon our clouded hills, and was Jerusalem builded here among those dark satanic mills. And it goes on, bring me my bow of burnished gold, bring my arrows of desire, bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, O bring my chariot of fire, I shall not cease from mental fight, or shall my sword sleep in my hand, until we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. I was talking to somebody yesterday and they said, that's Zionism. That's Zionism, he's talking about building Jerusalem in England. And the thing is, no, it's not. I mean, I can understand why someone might think of those words alone as referring to Zionism, but you see, Blake was not a Zionist in any way, shape or form, and nothing else in Blake's life would have sort of like, or anything else that Blake created could possibly refer to that. So he wasn't talking about that. I think he was referring, the first stanza refers to the idea that Jesus came to England. There's a rumour that Jesus, when he was a young man, before he began his ministry, came to England and went to Glastonbury and other places with Joseph of Arimathea, his uncle, who was also a businessman, a trader, travelled abroad. The dark satanic, see, Jerusalem, I think it's a spiritual thing. The building of Jerusalem refers to the building of a spiritual kingdom. What Mark Twain called India, the empire of the spirit. I think Blake sort of like had a similar idea about England. And the dark satanic mills, I think it's a modern reference that it refers to the powder mills. Because of course Blake wrote that during the Napoleonic War, when all around East London there were huge gunpowder mills where they used to make gunpowder for the army, and it was a huge booming business, what would nowadays be called the military industrial complex. And Blake was very opposed to it. Blake was very anti-war. Now Jerusalem has sort of become kind of a, of course it was put to music. There's a very stirring song, you know, da la 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 la. You know, people have often said that should become the national anthem of England, and maybe that's not a bad idea. I think it's a lovely song, although of course I understand it differently. But it's often interpreted as patriotic, very jingoistic, nationalistic kind of connotations, flag waving, hating foreigners, building the empire. Well, wherever Blake is, he must be turning and turning in his grave. You'll probably be able to see the ground disturbed where he's been turning over and over again at the thought of that. That's a good way to pinpoint the grave. No, Blake was not a nationalist in any way, shape or form. He was, what was he? How do I describe him? Oh, it's difficult to describe. You can't put a label on him, you see. Oh, so sit down again. Look at these. Look at these. You don't have to look at these pictures to see that. You can't put a label on the man. He was himself. He was something that was unique to himself, that's never been repeated and probably never will. In other words, he was a non-conformist of the most brilliant and magnificent kind. So he's someone I aspire to, and I think if I'd been around then and if he'd been around now, we'd have got on like a house on fire. We'd have been best buddies. I really think that. So, once again, a quick look around Bun Hill Fields, famous graveyard in London, just outside Liverpool Street Station, and the grave of the great William Blake and his wife Catherine. Thank you for watching Hapanwo TV. This is another part, I can't remember which one, of my Hapanwo London Truth Tour. And there's a goodbye there from this very friendly squirrel, who seems to be very fond of me. Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order.